Welcome to the Studio 134 podcast. My name's Alec. This is Gabriel. We've been talking about faith over fear for the last couple weeks. We're just going to kind of share some of our thoughts on what that looks like in our personal lives, some biblical examples of that, and hopefully some of that's useful for you guys. So, you got to share the talk last week. Can you kind of give me a 2-minute recap of kind of what you guys were talking about here in the Refuge last week?
I think we mostly went over faith over fear, and like how faith is when we're focused on God, and then fear is when we're focused on ourselves, and how focusing on God fulfills us, and looking towards God fills us and gives us that trust in Him, and how He will take care of us. And fear is like a lack of fulfillment and a lack of trust, and like seeking yourself, which will leave you empty. So that's kind of the gist of what we were talking about. And even looking back, like after the talk, thinking like, man, like what is really faith over fear, and how can I live that? It was so clear of how like not worrying is tied directly to trusting in God and being like, all right, God, like I'll let you take care of it. And like how faith really does impact us so heavily in our day-to-day, when in like Matthew 6, the scriptures that we were talking about, it's like, don't worry about what you're gonna eat or what you'll wear, or like pretty much like, what people will think of you or how you think people will think of you, but like trust in God and don't worry about that stuff, because He will take care of you, and just how good of a Father and good of a Creator He is. So that's been impacting me like ever since the talk and after the talk a lot.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's like an example in your life where you've chosen faith instead of living in fear, and like how have you seen God work through that, if that makes sense?
Man, like it's hard to answer, but it's also like really cool to look for those hard answers, because I think it's like with like my family and my relationships with friends, family, people that are close to me, because it's so easy sometimes to feel like either you got it down or it's never gonna work, kind of pick those extremes. And it's really easy to become fearful when it's all about like what you can get out of it, or what you haven't got out of it. And so I feel like in like relationships with like my family, or specifically like my brothers or my sisters, sometimes I'm like frustrated with why things aren't going the way I think they should, or why things are going in an unexpected way, and it's like I pick one of those extremes and I get filled with fear of like, oh, is this not enough? Am I not enough? Are they not enough? Stuff like that. Whereas like there was a time when I was like, well, it'll just be the way God has it, and as long as I trust in God and I'm doing as He's asking, like everything will be okay. And like I can have confidence that it's like I don't have to make it something that it's not, and I don't have to be like, or I get to be thankful for what it is. And that just has changed my whole perspective on like living with all the people that I love, and just in every way that I do. It's like such a pleasure now than sometimes it can be, where it may be the same situation but it feels so defeating, or it feels so fearful, and it's like against you. But when you're trusting in God, it's like, all right, it's gonna be okay. He's got this,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I guess, like, are there any stories in the Bible that immediately come to mind of, like, kind of that, of, like, how someone chose to live a life of faith instead of fearing what was ahead, even though, like, they were probably faced with some pretty heavy adversity?
Totally. I mean, yeah, like, I immediately think of one that I heard yesterday. Somebody was talking about Moses.
Okay.
And when he was fleeing from Egypt, like when Pharaoh was right after him.
Yeah.
And, like he was with all of the Israelites, and they were literally running from the Pharisee, or the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And like they get to the Red Sea, and I just don't think that Moses was like, oh yeah, like it'll just split open. Like that was probably not on his mind. That was like probably so far from his mind. And I can just imagine God being like, all right, Moses, split the Red Sea. And Moses was just like, dude, like, all right, what are you asking me? Like, I feel like that's what it would be like. If that was me, I'd be like, God, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about?
Right, like that seems like an outrageous request.
Exactly.
Like, you get to the sea and you're probably like,
Oh, it's over.
we're screwed.
Yeah. And so I bet like Moses had in that moment to choose to trust God. And
Yeah.
be like, all right, God, whatever. And then throw up his staff and, the sea split open. That's the immediate one I think of.
Yeah.
Where it's like he had every reason to be afraid, to choose fear, to be like, it's over, we're going to surrender, let's go back into slavery, figure something out later.
Yeah.
But he chose faith and they made it like in a crazy cool way.
Yeah.
But another one that comes to my mind is Ruth and her story. So the mom is like, she's like, all right, well, you can go. I want you to go have a better life. And then the daughter is like, no, stay. Or I'm going to stay with you. Like, my bones will be buried where your bones are buried. Like, God is going to take care of us and we're going to seek after him.
Mm-hmm.
And so this daughter, I think the daughter-in-law is Ruth. She's like, no, we're not getting out of here. I'm sticking with you. Like, we're going to trust in God.
Yeah.
And that was like her, even though the leader that she had in her life was filled with fear and people were leaving, people were dying. It was like, dude, I would have peaced out already. And Ruth was like, no, we're going to stick it out and we're going to trust in God. And then they go and they find people who are connected to their family. And like, dude, they were totally redeemed, totally brought back to where God, like, it was crazy because they were not only brought back to where God had them, but they were taken to a new place of God's favor and of God's love and light and abundance. And like, dude, the story of Ruth is crazy and it's only 4 chapters. If you ever get a time to read it, it's worth it.
Okay. Yeah.
But like, it was totally a situation of fear and faith and choosing faith over that and how God really came through in the end. That one almost is more impactful to me sometimes because it's like, it could be so easy to just be like, well, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But in that situation, like, faith is like trusting that God will stick to what he's promised,
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There's a lot of crazy examples. Like, I think the first one that comes to mind for me is Job, if you guys have ever heard of him. Yeah. From what I remember, like, he was one of the most faithful people to ever walk the face of the earth, to the point where, if I remember right, Satan asked God's permission to do everything he could to tempt him. Basically, God allowed that to happen, knowing that Job would choose to continue to walk in faith. And so, like, even though, like, the devil came and did all these crazy, terrible things to him and just, like, basically destroyed his life, like, even in his anger and even in his frustration, he was like, okay, God, like, I trust you. And he just kept choosing to follow God in that. And like, that is an intense story if you ever get a chance to read it. Like,
what do you think kept Job's faith in God in those moments of despair?
I think he probably realized, like, God's been faithful in his life before. He's been good to him before. Like, God is perfect. I believe it's Joshua 1:9 says that God has a plan and a purpose for us, not to harm us. I would assume he probably would have thought something along those lines of like, God, you've shown up in my life before. You've done good things before. I know you're not bad. I know this is Satan. Like, this sucks, but I'm going to continue to follow you. I would assume it was something along those lines. I know for me, it's definitely been in situations like that. Like, I had a situation back in college at one point where, like, I couldn't find a job. It had taken me like 6 or 7 months, and I was overseas on my own and just kind of was like, okay, well, I have enough money this week to pay rent and keep my apartment, or I have enough money to buy groceries. I don't know what to do. Like, God, you got to help me. And so I was like, all right, like, I don't know what you're telling me to do right now, God, but like, I think what you would be telling me to do is pay rent. So I paid my rent, and then, I was like, well, now what? Like, I don't know how I'm going to eat the next couple days. Like, what am I supposed to do? I hadn't told anyone. I showed up to my next class, and my whole class bought me groceries for the week. Yeah. So that was like okay, yep, that, and then later that night, I go home and some more people from the church show up to my doorstep with a bunch more groceries, like so much that I couldn't eat it all before it expired. Like I had to like have my roommates help me eat it, and we still couldn't. So like God comes through even in the moments where it's like, okay, like what am I supposed to do? Like, and I think that's one of the cool things about why God does that. Like I think sometimes you will get to a really hard place in life where things are really hard. And I think that's kind of the point. I think sometimes he takes you to those places so that you have no other option but to trust him and watch him do something. And then when he does, like, it makes your faith so much stronger. But yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, like there's situations in life like that are really hard, but I believe the Bible is very clear that like everything happens for a reason, and God has a plan for you. He's not there to harm you, so.
Yeah, it says that he knows our days before, he knew our days before we were even born, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, there are verses that like are so inspiring where you feel like you're at one of those points where it's like, I have no other thing but to trust God. Mm-hmm. And like, dude, I feel like if we were for like a little earlier along, like, all right, God, you know what? I have other options, but I'm gonna trust you. I feel like it would work out then as well. But like when we are so stubborn sometimes to wait till the end, it's like, you know what? I'm gonna trust God, and he accepts it either way. Yeah. He accepts it when you say it from the get-go or at the end. Like he just wants your heart, and that's why sometimes it may not even be that intense of a situation, but it can feel so intense. And it's because he's looking for your heart. He's looking for that trust, that connection of your soul to his. And so, dude, I think it's so powerful. Yeah. Truly, like the faith, it's not blind. Yeah. And it's not empty. Right. It's something that it's something you can't see, but you truly believe in, that you truly hold on to. Exactly. That is your refuge, your what's the word? Your rock.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the whole point of faith is that like we're not designed to do life on our own. We're not supposed to be able to figure it out on our own. Like that's what God's for. That's a huge part of why he's there. Like
totally. Yeah, he's such a good father.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's about it. So, yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.